Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we are talking about the two governor's races up in November of 2025, this being the states of Virginia and New Jersey, and we're giving our updated prediction for the month of September in these two respective races. Now, if this is your first time watching a video about the Virginia and New Jersey governor's races, now it's actually a pretty good time, as usually right after Labor Day is when a lot of these close governor's races in the off-year presidential elections, meaning the year after the presidential year, often that's when the media attention starts to pick up on these races. So now is a good time to start looking at these races and how they are currently going. So going to start first with the state of Virginia. Virginia right now is a two-way contest between Democrat Abigail Spanberger and Republican Winsome Sears. Now, in case you're unfamiliar with the two candidates, Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, is a former U.S. representative from Virginia's 7th Congressional District, which is in the northeastern part of Virginia in the Richmond area. And on the Republican side, the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Virginia, Winsome Earl Sears, she is the officially Republican nominee facing off in the general election. Now, this race is open due to the fact that Virginia's constitution does not allow for a governor to serve two consecutive back-to-back terms. A governor can run again 4 years later, but they cannot serve back-to-back terms. So the governor, Glenn Youngkin, is unable to seek a second consecutive term in office, which makes it an open race. Now for the general election, right now the early predictions for this race, Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, and Sourdo's Crystal Ball have this race listed as lean for the Democrats, while Race to the White House has it as likely Democratic, and State Navigate, which was originally rendered as CN Analysis, has it as solid Democratic. The early polling data thus far in this race shows Abigail Spanberger with a pretty large lead in this race. Real Clear Politics' polling average has Spanberger leading by 6.8%. Decision Desk HQ, Spanberger is leading with 7.9%. Race to the White House, the average has Spanberger up 7.9%, with the average of these three being 7.6% lead for Abigail Spanberger. Now, this is certainly very significant, as this race is currently held, or the seat is currently held by the Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, so Spanberger leading would be a Democratic flip. And it's looked like for the past few months now, obviously polls aren't always everything, but they are a very useful tool to give us a little bit of an idea in the race, and it's been very clear. We have not seen one poll where Winsome Sears has led over Abigail Spanberger at this current point in the campaign. And it's been pretty consistent here. Abigail Spanberger has been polling usually around the mid to high 40% or so, 46, 49, 48, 47% or so, where Winsome Sears, for the most part, has been polling in either the mid 30% or even into the low 40s now. Some of the best numbers she has put up in these polls happened just recently in the coefficient poll that has her at 43%. Roanoke College has her at 39%. This is some of the highest we've seen Winsome Sears get so far. Now, something that's very important in these races are looking at the historical precedent, because Virginia, like New Jersey, since they take place in the first year after the presidential election year, usually these elections end up being a repudiation of the current president and the president's party that's in charge of the White House. So what that means is essentially the party that's in the White House usually does not win their respective governor's race in the state of Virginia. So we can look at some recent election results. We can look at 2021, where Joe Biden, the Democrat, was president. Glenn Youngkin, the Republican, narrowly won by 1.9%. 2017, the Democrat Ralph Northam was running in the same year when President Trump, first term, was the Republican president. He defeated Ed Gillespie by 8.9% in that race. 2013 did end up being an exception, where Democrat Terry McAuliffe defeated Republican Ken Cuccinelli by 2.5%, though it should be worth noting a third-party candidate did get 6.52% of the vote. So that very well could have been a very special situation there. 2009, when Obama was first elected president, Republican Bob McDonnell won this race by 17.4%. Now going back to 2005, President Bush at the time just got reelected, and then Democratic Governor Democrat Tim Kaine won the governor's race. And just one more to prove it here, 2001, Bush just won the 2000 election, Mark Warner elected Democrat. Virginia has this track record going back a long ways, and it's pretty reasonable why. It is a pretty consistent trend. So that election basis alone suggests that Abigail Spanberger should be in for a very good night. And the early polling data thus far certainly seems that Spanberger is on her way to becoming the next governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And it's not just that, but look at the polling numbers right now, where Spanberger's up around 48% in the Real Clear Politics average, Sears is at 41.4%, but still 10.4% is undecided. So there is certainly, at this current point in time, enough undecided vote or other vote in this race to make up the margin for Winsome Sears, but to do so, Sears would have to win almost every single undecided vote that is left out there. And then she would be essentially matching what Glenn Youngkin got in 2021, where he defeated Terry McAuliffe about 50 to 48. And based on the current election environment that 2025 is projecting to be, based on the historical precedent of these midterm or of these off-year elections, that's really not something that's likely to happen. We can actually look at the 2021 election results in Virginia and just give you a quick look here. Glenn Youngkin got 50.6%, Terry McAuliffe got 48.6%. Now, there are a lot of counties in Virginia. All of them have differing degrees of total votes in the counties, but these are some very important areas of note that I'm going to mention. Pretty much every article or video you watch about Virginia politics is going to talk about the northern Washington, D.C. suburbs, or the northern Virginia suburbs. These three counties, Fairfax, Prince William, and Loudoun, are three of the largest counties in the state of Virginia by population, and they almost always swing the election towards the Democrats, depending on the margin in these areas. These are some of the fastest growing areas in the state right outside of Washington, D.C., and they are the reason that Virginia went from being a very solid Republican state in the early 2000s to being a toss-up state in the early 2010s to being a pretty reliable Democratic state in the 2016-2020s since then on. And it's because these three counties have grown so much in population. But when you see these numbers from the 2021 race, Glenn Youngkin lost Loudoun County to Terry McAuliffe by 11 points. Now you may be wondering, okay, well, isn't 11 points very good? Well, hold on to that just 1 second. You also see Prince William about a 15-point win. Fairfax ended up being about a 30-point win. Now let's take a look at the 2017 governor's race, where Democrat Ralph Northam defeated the Republican candidate Ed Gillespie by about 8.9% overall in the state. Loudoun County, remember, it was 11 points in the Youngkin race. This one, Northam won it by 20. We could see Prince William, this one was a 22-point win for Northam over Gillespie. And in Fairfax, it was a 36-point win. So not only did Youngkin lose all the same counties that Gillespie did, but Youngkin made up about 6 or 7% respectively in each of these three D.C. suburban counties. And when Youngkin did that, it made this election very much in play in 2021. Because based on how Youngkin did throughout the rest of the Commonwealth of Virginia, essentially, Youngkin was able to tie, if not do slightly better than McAuliffe in the rest of the state, but these three counties made the difference. So by cutting into these margins that Gillespie and Northam got in 2017, combined with the areas that Youngkin improved on throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, ended up essentially being Youngkin winning by about 2% statewide once everything was factored in from the D.C. suburbs and the rest of the Commonwealth. So the margins in these three areas, Loudoun, Fairfax, and Prince William, are going to be very crucial to watch for on election night. If we see these results for Abigail Spanberger matching what Terry McAuliffe got in 2021, this could be a very bad night for Spanberger and the Democrats. On the flip side, if we're seeing the results come in early on and we're seeing Abigail Spanberger getting the margins that Ralph Northam got in 2017, where she's winning Loudoun by about 20 points or so, or Prince William by 22, and that's likely indicating she's matching the 2017 numbers and is in for a very good and very early night as well. Don't forget, this race got called by about 9:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Virginia when the polls closed at 7 p.m. on the East Coast. So Virginia, we're going to find out the election results actually relatively pretty quick on election night in November. So that's a very key area I'm watching is the northern DC suburbs. The last area I just want to show you is a very key suburban area in Virginia, and that is Virginia Beach and Chesapeake County right next to it. This is an area that voted for Glenn Youngkin in 2021 by about 8 points and voted in Chesapeake for Glenn Youngkin by about 6 points. This area is very big because when a Republican is winning the Commonwealth of Virginia, it's more likely than not they're winning these two counties. In 2017, when Ed Gillespie lost, he lost Virginia Beach by about 5 points, and he lost Chesapeake by about 8 points. So if the D.C. suburbs are not in yet, and you're looking for an indication of, okay, well, how well is the Republican or the Democrat doing? If Virginia Beach and Chesapeake counties are in and these areas are going Democratic, that could be a good sign for the Democrats and the Commonwealth of Virginia as well, or vice versa. If the Republicans are winning them, maybe the Republicans are in for a better night. So that's an important area to watch for as well. So Based on the 2017 numbers, again, 2021 was a GOP win by 1.9. 2017 ended up being about an 8.9% win for Northam versus Gillespie. This race is very interesting because Abigail Spanberger and Winsome Sears, at this current point in time, the race was tracking to be a very big blowout win for Spanberger versus Sears, possibly even breaking over that 10% number. And when you look at the polling data from 2017 and how it kind of developed into the Virginia governor's race, things actually ended up being relatively close once the final few days of the campaign happened. Northam only defeated Gillespie in the final polling average by about 3.3%. At this current point in time, which is about the end of August, beginning of Virginia, the only poll around this time showed about a 5-point lead for Northam over Gillespie, about 44 to 39% in this University of Mary Washington poll. Mason-Dixon in the second week of September showed about a 1-point race. So this race from 2017 looked like it was being a lot more competitive, where Ed Gillespie early on actually started out leading in a lot of the early polls. Yes, there was still a huge amount of undecided vote, but Gillespie started out in the early lead. And then as the general election got closer, President Trump's national approval rating started to play a significant role in this campaign, and Ed Gillespie really never had a chance after that happened, and the Democrat went on to win by a pretty large margin. This time, we can see for 2025, Winsome Sears has not led in any poll. Now, the race does seem to be getting a little bit tighter as we get closer, but Abigail Spanberger certainly has a very sizable lead. The question is going to be, in my opinion, how much will that lead be? Right now, I think we're going to see Virginia go in the likely Democratic category. This is anywhere from 5 to 15% margin of victory. Right now, I'm tracking around an 8.5 to 9-point victory. I'm sort of on par with 2017. It should also be worth noting, the state of Virginia at the presidential level did just vote for Kamala Harris by 5.8%. Though it was very competitive, this was not a state that voted for Donald Trump. So in an election year that should be more energetic for the Democrats should be about to do very well in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that is Virginia. Now we're going to move to the state of New Jersey. New Jersey is very interesting as well because New Jersey in the 2024 presidential race just saw its closest matchup where it voted for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump by 5.9%. That was a massive swing of roughly about 10 points from 2020 when Joe Biden won it by about 16%. So Republicans are feeling very optimistic about New Jersey and are trying to put it in play. Now, the Democratic candidate is U.S. Representative Mikey Sherrill from the 11th District in New Jersey. She won the Democratic primary. The Democratic governor, Phil Murphy, is term limited, cannot seek a third consecutive term, so it is an open race. But Mikey Sherrill did win the won the New Jersey Democratic primary. Did a video on that back when that happened. On the Republican side of things, Jack Ciattarelli, the nominee for governor in 2021 against Phil Murphy, won the Republican primary again in a pretty landslide victory for him in that primary and is now facing off in the general election. Now, this race is very interesting because of the two governor's races, though Virginia and New Jersey, it's long been thought that Virginia is the more competitive state of the two in the past 20 years or so. New Jersey is actually tracking to be the more competitive of the two governor's races in this cycle. Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, Sabro Crystal Ball, and Race to the White House all have this race listed as lean for the Democrat, for Mikey Sherrill. And this race thus far is very interesting. Right now, there hasn't been a polling average specifically done from any of the major polling websites yet. The most recent poll we have from Rutgers Eagleton showed Mikey Sherrill leading over Jack Ciattarelli 44 to 35%, with still 17% undecided. Now, there's also been some other polls, like from StimSite Research, which shows about a 6-point lead for Sherrill over Ciattarelli, but again, 9% undecided. Fairleigh Dixon University, 45-37, 15% undecided. So the argument that I see for this race right now is that it certainly looks like Mikey Sherrill has a lead in the New Jersey governor's race, and if the election were held today, I think it's more likely than not that Mikey Sherrill would probably win. But the polling in the 2025 New Jersey governor's race is not really all that different than the polling data we saw back in the 2021 governor's race, where ultimately it ended up being very hard to gauge. Because in the 2021 governor's race at this current point in time, by the end of August, even going up to early September, a Monmouth University poll showed Phil Murphy leading over Jack Ciattarelli by a lot, 52-36. But other than that, for Fabrizio and Associates, the Republican President Trump pollster, had about a 2-point race, 43-41. National Research Republican poll showed a 3-point race. Monmouth University had it 51-38, though. Only the Republican polls really showed a very close race up until really about October. Emerson College, very reputable polling source, had it about a 6-point race for Murphy versus Ciattarelli. Monmouth 50 to 39, Stockton 50 to 41. There wasn't really many polls that showed it an under 5-point race heading into the final few weeks, other than the Republican Trafalgar poll. Then what ended up happening ultimately in 2021 was a very surprisingly close election. Phil Murphy won at 51.2%, but Jack Ciattarelli got 48% of the vote. Ciattarelli making a lot of big gains in some key areas, like in Hunterdon County and Morris County, and nearly flipping Passaic County and making big gains in Bergen County as well, in the surrounding upper northeastern part of New Jersey. This was definitely very much of a surprise. So when we're tracking this race for 2025 in the state of New Jersey, I'm looking at these polls and I'm examining them very, very carefully. Because New Jersey certainly seems to be trending towards the Republicans and a little bit away from the Democrats based on the recent election years. This governor's race being under 5 points in 2021 and the presidential race being under 6 points in 2024, at some point we have to consider the fact that New Jersey is not the safe Democratic stronghold that it once was. But that doesn't also mean the Democrats are going to lose this race just because it's trending more in the Republican direction. Because this race is also, as I mentioned with Virginia, taking place in an off-year election where the Democratic Party should be favored. Now, New Jersey doesn't follow the same playbook really as Virginia, with the off-year party always winning, and this because New Jersey is more of a Democratic state historically than Virginia is. But this race is shaping up to be another very competitive race. When depending on the poll, it looks like Mikey Sherrill has a larger lead in a lot of these polls than even at this current point in time in the last race, but there's also a large amount of undecided vote out there. And it should be worth noting there hasn't been that many polls conducted in this New Jersey governor's race, and they're sort of kind of all over the place at this current point in time. It should be worth noting also that I believe StimSite Research is what the former Monmouth University pollster is now running after the Monmouth University pollster program kind of got shut down. That's his new polling firm. So I would take a good amount of stock in this poll that shows about a 6-point lead for Sherrill over Ciattarelli, but again, with 9% undecided. So I think this race is still very much wide open, and I do think Mikey Sherrill at this current point in time does have a narrow lead in this race, but again, I think a lot of those undecided votes in New Jersey may break again for Jack Ciattarelli like they did back in 2021. The question will be, will it be enough for Mikey Sherrill to end up winning this race, or for Jack Ciattarelli to narrowly pull off an upset? That remains to be seen. Now, as I mentioned with Virginia, I showed off some of the key counties to watch for the New Jersey governor election. Again, we saw Jack Ciattarelli do very well in northern New Jersey in these counties like Atlantic and Cumberland and Salem and Gloucester, and also in Monmouth and Ocean County. I'm expecting Ciattarelli to win these counties and to win them pretty handedly as well. The key counties I'm watching for, I'm watching Bergen County, I'm watching Passaic County, Hunterdon County, and Morris counties. Because Morris voted for Ciattarelli by 11 points, Hunterdon voted for Ciattarelli by about 18 points. But Passaic was about a 4-point Ciattarelli loss. Bergen was about a 6-point or so Ciattarelli loss. In the 2024 presidential election, President Trump won Passaic County by 2.9%. Trump won Morris County by 2.7% and lost Bergen by 3.4%. I think there's a very realistic scenario here that if Jack Ciattarelli is winning this governor's race, he may very well be winning Passaic County, winning Morris County by around the same margin of this governor's race, but he may also be flipping Bergen County as well. That could be the sign this election may be going towards Jack Ciattarelli. That would also be very significant, as I do believe Mikey Sherrill's congressional district does have parts of Essex County, Passaic County, and Bergen County in it, so that would be very significant if Ciattarelli is able to make those inroads in that area. But for right now, my current prediction for the New Jersey governor's race, Virginia, again, I have it as the likely Democratic. New Jersey, I currently have it as lean for the Democrats. This is in between a 5 and a 1% margin of victory. I think it stays under 5% right now. I think it's currently tracking to be around a 4.5-point victory for Democrat Mikey Sherrill. So it is slightly more Democratic than it was back in 2021. But I think this is a very close race that I'm definitely watching very closely, because this one could go either way when everything is said and done. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below. Tell me your thoughts. Any questions or comments or suggestions you have, please leave them down below. I always check all those out. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today I'm talking about the 2025 New York City mayoral race and giving my updating prediction for how I currently see this race going at obviously the beginning of September now, right around Labor Day, and how I think this race is going to end up all going and once media attention starts to pick this race up. Now, I just want to say at the start of the video, I couldn't find a specific map to use just of New York City. So for the purpose of today's video, I'm just going to be using the entire state of New York and coloring in the overall margin using the state of New York just instead of the city, just so there's no confusion on that. Okay, so with that said, let's get into the 2025 New York City mayoral race, because this is a very fascinating situation that is happening here. For starters, the New York City mayoral race is currently in between 4 candidates at this current point in time. Starting with the current mayor, Eric Adams, he won the election in 2021 as a Democrat after facing a lot of scandals and such over the last few years and few months now. Adams decided to not run in the Democratic primary and run for re-election as an independent candidate. So that alone shook up the race very much so. Another very important aspect of this race was what happened in the Democratic primary, which is Democratic governor or former Democratic governor of the state of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who had to resign from office due to the scandals that faced him and plagued him. He ultimately decided to run for New York City mayor. And it was long assumed by many that Andrew Cuomo would end up being the Democratic nominee, until Assemblymember Zohran Mamdani decided to run for this race, running a grassroots campaign and really coming out of nowhere and all of a sudden being this big force in the Democratic primary. And even heading into the final days of the primary, there was a lot of Zohran Mamdani momentum, but ultimately, most, including myself, predicted that Andrew Cuomo would still ultimately end up winning the Democratic primary, though we did expect it to be very close. But what ended up actually happening was on the first round of voting, as New York City, the Democratic primary utilizes a ranked choice voting system, Zohran Mamdani ended up defeating Andrew Cuomo in the first round, 43.82% to Cuomo's 36.12%, which was a very shocking result, as many, again including myself, expected at very least Andrew Cuomo to be leading on the first round of voting in the New York City Democratic mayoral primary, and if some way Mamdani was able to win, it would be because he barely squeaked by in the final round of voting, but that ultimately did not end up happening. It was the complete opposite. Mamdani was the one leading on round 1. And then once the final rounds of ranked choice voting were tabulated, Mamdani ended up winning by a massive amount, 56.39% to Cuomo's 43.61%. So this was a very, very big Democratic primary. Now, Zohran Mamdani has gone very viral on social media and is someone that a lot of young Democratic voters and young progressive voters are really rallying behind, and is certainly scaring a lot of establishment New York Democrats, especially like those that supported Andrew Cuomo. So what Andrew Cuomo did was, under a different party name, he launched a third-party bid for New York City mayor after he lost the primary. So now you have Zohran Mamdani as the Democratic nominee, you have Eric Adams as the independent candidate, and you also have Andrew Cuomo launching a third-party candidate as well in the race, trying to stop Zohran Mamdani. Now we also have the Republican candidate, where this is a Republican nominee from 2021, Curtis Sliwa. He once again ran for the Republican nomination and ended up running unopposed and won this nomination without any trouble really at all. So the race is now set with Mamdani as the Democrat, Sliwa as the Republican, and now technically 3 independents in the race, with Eric Adams, the current mayor, Andrew Cuomo, the former governor of New York, and also independent Jim Waldron. Now, no disrespect to Jim Waldron, but in the early polling data, he isn't taking up a huge amount of support, so he does really not factor into the overall conversation of this race as much as some of the other independent candidates in this race. There's also the Working Families parties as well, which often endorses the Democratic Party nominee in the general elections, even if they don't receive the WFP support in the respective Democratic primary. Now, once Zohran Mamdani won the Democratic primary, he became the nominee for this party. So it's going to be all of the Working Families Party vote for Zohran Mamdani also gets added to the Democratic Mamdani's vote total. So that's a little bit of an interesting thing about New York City mayor. So that's up to speed really on what the candidates are and how they are doing. Now we're looking at the polling data, where there's not necessarily one specific polling average to look at, but the early polls have shown that in this race, Zohran Mamdani has been leading in pretty much every single poll, and has been really since he won the Democratic primary. The most recent poll from American Pulse Research and Polling shows the way the race is currently going. Mamdani starts out with 37%, Andrew Cuomo is in second place at 25%, Curtis Lee was in third at 17%, Eric Adams in fourth with 11%, Jim Waldron in fifth at 2%, with 8% of the vote undecided. So with that, roughly a 12% lead for Mamdani over the nearest challenger, which is Cuomo. Based on the way the race is currently going, the track record has been if no candidates drop out, there's not enough undecided vote left to stop Zohran Mamdani from becoming the next mayor of New York City. And so far, it certainly seems that way. Now, there's been discussions out there about, well, what if Eric Adams or Curtis Sliwa were to drop out of the race and support Andrew Cuomo as one of the only candidates that can actually beat Zohran Mamdani, if that were to happen? That would give a better chance at stopping Mamdani, but Adams and Sliwa have been adamant that they will not be dropping out of the race for Andrew Cuomo, and they have gone after Cuomo just as much as they've gone after Zohran Mamdani, even though their polling data clearly shows Andrew Cuomo is the best candidate at stopping Zohran Mamdani in a head-to-head matchup. We even saw this in the recent Tolchin research poll, which showed Mamdani leading among all the candidates 42%, up to next to 26% for Cuomo. In the head-to-head of Cuomo versus Mamdani, Cuomo actually led 52% to 41%, with 7% still undecided, whereas Mamdani versus Cuomo ended up being 45 to 42. Pretty much in every instance, Mamdani in a head-to-head against any candidate not named Andrew Cuomo ultimately wins in these polls. Cuomo seems to be the only candidate in that head-to-head matchup that can maybe take Mamdani down. But for that to happen, Adams, Sliwa, and Waldron would all need to drop out of the race and support Cuomo, and thus far they've been adamant that will not be happening. So Mamdani's been polling roughly around the middle to even high 40% or so, 44%, 48% at times, 46%. He's in very good standing to become the next mayor of New York City. The question will be, if all the candidates remain in the race, what does his margin of victory end up looking like? And that's where things are very complicated, because based on what the 2021 mayoral election looked like in New York City, we really don't have much to go off of, because that was Democrat Eric Adams facing off against Republican Curtis Sliwa. So it was a head-to-head election that ended up being a very big blowout win for the Democrat. Every borough in New York City, except for Richmond County, where Staten Island is, they all went Democratic. Staten Island's the only one that went Republican. This time around, we're looking at a race where there's going to be multiple candidates running and a lot of Democratic vote, probably vote splitting between Mamdani and Cuomo and Adams and Waldron even a little bit as well. So it's very interesting to watch for as well. Gotham polling and analytics from back on August 11th had the race with Mamdani at 42 and Cuomo at 23. And that head-to-head matchup, Mamdani led over Cuomo 42 to 31, with 27% undecided. So it still seems there is a good number of undecided vote left out there in this New York City mayoral race. But right now, it certainly looks like Zohran Mamdani has a large enough lead to become the next mayor of New York City, and the third-party candidates really splitting the vote is only making that outcome even more likely. Ultimately, come Election Day, how this all ends up going, it really is contingent on what the other candidates decide to do. The truth is, the only way Mamdani does not become mayor is if they all drop out and endorse Cuomo. And I personally think there's less than like a 10% chance of that happening, since Adams and Sliwa have been adamant they are not getting out of this race. So when it comes to predicting the New York City mayoral election, right now I am definitely forecasting Zohran Mamdani to win this race. The question will be what the margin is. And of this scale of safe being 15% or more as a safe victory, likely rating being in between 5 and 15%, and 5 and under, or 5 to 1 being lean and 1 under being tilt. Right now I'm currently forecasting for Zohran Mamdani to win in the likely category of a 5 to 15% margin victory. Based on the way the race is currently going, I have Mamdani winning by around that 13 to 14% margin at this current point in time. There isn't a lot of undecided vote left out there in the four-way contest, but I do think Mamdani gets at least 2 or 3% of those undecided voters and ultimately ends up giving him the victory. Now, if all the candidates but Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo drop out of the race, then I think this becomes a much more interesting conversation, and I would do a video down the road discussing that possibility. But Mamdani versus Cuomo, that you could see Cuomo actually maybe win that matchup. I would still very narrowly have it starting out in the lean category for Mamdani at this current point in time, but I do think it would be a much closer race in that scenario. But the way the race is currently constructed, I do have Zohran Mamdani defeating Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa and Eric Adams in this race by around 13% at this current point in time. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below telling me your thoughts and any comments or questions you have about this race. If you live in New York City, which candidate are you supporting in this race? Make sure to leave that all down below. Thank you so much for watching. Again, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone, and welcome to today's video. Today I am discussing the 2025 Boston mayoral race and going into all the details on the race and my updated prediction for the month of September for how I think it is going to end up going on Election Day in November. Now, before I get into it, I do just want to point out the map I'm currently using. I could not find a map that just had the city of Boston on it, so I am using the state of Massachusetts and putting it in yellow to represent the overall city of Boston's election results, and I'll be coloring the state of Massachusetts to serve the purpose of the city of Boston for the sake of this video. So without further ado, let's get into it. The 2025 mayoral race is going to be held. First, there's going to be a primary election on September 9th, 2025 to whittle it down to just 2 candidates, as there's currently 4 candidates who qualified for the ballot, and the general election will be held on November 4th, 2025. Now, the incumbent mayor of the city of Boston is Democrat Michelle Wu, who, even though the mayoral election in Boston is technically nonpartisan, obviously the candidates that are running have their own political beliefs and self-aligned with the political parties. The Democratic incumbent mayor, Michelle Wu, is running for re-election to a second term. Now, back in 2021, Michelle Wu won against fellow Democrat Anissa Essaibi-George. Michelle Wu was viewed as the more progressive Democrat. Anissa Essaibi-George was viewed as the more moderate, self-described moderate candidate on the Wikipedia page here. And Michelle Wu ended up winning 64% to 35.6%. So Wu obviously ended up winning by a very large margin in 2021. Now for 2025, Wu's most notable challenger right now is Josh Kraft, the son of the New England Patriots owner, Robert Kraft. He is an American nonprofit executive and is the head of the Kraft Family Philanthropies and board chairman of the National Urban League's Eastern Massachusetts chapter. He has worked also for 12 years as CEO of the Boys and Girls Club in Boston. He is right now the top challenger to Michelle Wu, and in polling is viewed as the top challenger to Michelle Wu as well. It's also worth noting that he is also a Democrat as well. 2 other candidates that have qualified for the ballot, which is going to cause for that preliminary election to happen, which is on, again, as I mentioned, September 9th. So make sure to go vote after that if anyone in Boston is listening. Domingos De Rosa, a community activist and perennial candidate. He is an independent. He is running, as well as Robert Capucci, a former member of the Boston School Committee and candidate for mayor in 2013, 2017, and 2021. He is a Republican candidate. Obviously, he did not qualify to be on the, or he did not get enough votes to be in the general election in 2021, but he is running for this race as well. Other candidates did end up running, but did not ultimately qualify to be on the ballot. 2 notable Massachusetts politicians that did decline to run are Ed Flynn, city councilor from the 2nd District, former president of the Boston City Council, and son of the former mayor, Ray Flynn, decided not to run, as well as Thomas O'Brien, the former Boston chief of planning, and also brother of Boston College Eagles head coach, Bill O'Brien. He is a Democrat, both of which are Democrats. As for this race, Josh Kraft has the endorsement of Rachel Rollins, the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Massachusetts from 2022 to 2023, former Commissioner of the Boston Police Department, William Gross, as well as his father, Robert Kraft, and rapper Meek Mill, close friends of Kraft and the Kraft family, as well as 3 labor organizations as well. Michelle Wu has the endorsement of both Massachusetts U.S. Senators Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren, both of which have given her endorsement. U.S. Representative Ayanna Pressley has also given the endorsement, and then numerous amounts of state senators, state representatives, Boston city councilors, organizations, including former Boston Red Sox star David Ortiz, all have which endorsed Michelle Wu. Now, for the polling in this race, there hasn't been a lot of polls that have been conducted in this race, but 3 have been done by some pretty reputable sources. One from Emerson College, top pollster, see their name in a lot of many races. They had a poll from back in February that showed Michelle Wu at 43%, Josh Kraft at 29%, with still about 24% undecided in this race. So Michelle Wu leading, and Kraft and Wu both would lead in advance to the general election, where Wu would be leading by a pretty large, considerable amount. Another poll from back in April came from St. Anselm College, another top college and pollster in the New England region. And in that poll, it showed that Michelle Wu had 53.4%, Josh Kraft had 21.1%, but still 19.5% undecided. So in that one again, Michelle Wu and Josh Kraft, the top 2 vote getters. Michelle Wu had a very large lead over Josh Kraft, roughly about 32% in that race. For Suffolk University, a university in the city of Boston, in July, the most recent poll that we have for this race shows Michelle Wu at 59.8%, Josh Kraft 29.6%, and then about 6.6% undecided in that race, with also Domingos de Rosa also getting about 2.8%. So not a ton of polling data to go off of, but Michelle Wu clearly seems to be in the early polls taken thus far, the front runner in this race. And this race seems to be shaping up so far very similarly to the last mayoral race in 2021, where in that race, though it was an open race where the Democratic incumbent Kim Janey ultimately lost in the preliminary primary, Michelle Wu was considered to be the favorite heading into the general election, and ultimately she ended up winning by a very large percentage, just a bit shy of 30 points, about 28.5% to 29% or so in this race. As for 2025, again, not much polling data to go off of besides this, but it does seem like right now Michelle Wu is in pretty good standing in this race, and certainly Michelle Wu's name's probably going to be out there in the media a lot more following her standoff with the President Trump and the Trump administration and ICE and Tom Homan and all that's going on with the city of Boston. So her name, I'm sure, is in the media a lot more. And in the city of Boston, which votes overwhelmingly Democratic, that may actually be helping her in the state of Massachusetts. Just to give you an idea of how Massachusetts obviously votes at the presidential level, one of the most Democratic states in the country, voting for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump by about 25.2%, including Suffolk County, which is where Boston obviously is, voted for Harris by about 52.1%. So a very Democratic area, which also makes sense when you consider the top two candidates for mayor, and Michelle Wu and Josh Kraft, are both Democrats. The question will it be Michelle Wu or Josh Kraft? Michelle Wu certainly, I would say, is the more farther left progressive of the Democrats. Josh Kraft would be viewed as the more establishment Democrat. And it seems thus far Michelle Wu is on a pretty strong path to winning re-election in this Boston mayoral race. What the actual margins end up being, we're going to have to wait and see. How it all breaks down by vote, we'll have to wait and see as well. This is what the map ended up look like for Boston. Obviously, there's a lot of different precincts in Boston and such, and different surrounding towns and parts of Boston as well, but that's what it ended up looking like. The blue being the Michelle Wu color, the green being the Anissa Essaibi George color. Depending on the margins, it is possible we see Michelle Wu sweep every county, or town or precinct in Boston. I don't think we will, but that could potentially be happening for this race as well. Could Josh Kraft still win this race? It is theoretically possible, especially if the Emerson College poll ends up being correct, where Michelle Wu only has about 43% and 24% is still undecided, though Suffolk and St. Anselm both saying Michelle Wu starts out over 50% of the vote, while Kraft still sits in the 20s. I think certainly suggests that there's not that much undecided vote left compared to what there was back in February, and it's more likely that not Michelle Wu has enough vote to break that 50% number. And the question will be, I think ultimately when everything is said and done, is how close will this race actually get? Because at this current point in time for Michelle Wu versus Josh Kraft, I have a very hard time imagining Josh Kraft winning this race unless there's a lot of people in Boston that are voting for Josh Kraft that are being very, very quiet about it. Otherwise, I have not seen much on social media or in news media suggesting that would be the case. So the question I think is going to be not whether Michelle Wu wins or not, but what the margin of victory will be. And can Michelle Wu win this race by more than 15%? And to give you an idea of what a two-way race would look like, where it'd be a 15% win or so, you would have to be looking at something around like a 57-43 result or a 58-42 result for Michelle Wu to win by more than 15% of the vote. And based on how the last race went, where Michelle Wu ended up winning by 64-35.6, it's possible that the race could be closer, but ultimately when everything is said and done, I do think Michelle Wu does win re-election. Whether she wins by 15 points or more, that is still very much yet to be determined, but at this current point in time, I think she wins by just a little bit over 15%, really without having too much of a problem in this race. I think she wins re-election by a pretty considerable amount. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you did, leave a comment below. Tell me what you think about this race. Do you think Michelle Wu is going to win? Do you think Josh Kraft is going to win this race? If you're from Boston or Massachusetts, which of these two candidates would you prefer ends up winning this mayoral election? Leave it all down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, please remember to hit like and subscribe, and I hope to see you in a future video.